This year, we celebrate a significant milestone, the 25th anniversary of English taught program at our institute. For a quarter of a century, this program has supported students from all around the world in building language skills, confidence, and academic success. This is a story of people, passion, and a commitment to excellence. Join us as we look back and celebrate 25 years of growth, connection, and learning.
Welcome to the first panel that we're going to have. As you see, the title looks very serious, and it's meant to be serious, although the celebrations of today might give it a little bit of jubilant spirit. Apart from Professor Mach, we have our dear friends, coordinators of programs that we have at CES. What we would like to think about is the question of what European studies are right now. What does it mean to teach European studies today? What do European studies mean in a world that is getting much more fragmented, multi-centered, in which various post-colonial discourses are also making the talks about Europe particularly problematic?
When European studies was created as a field of studies, there was a discussion between those in Poland, in the whole country, between those who wanted to see European studies as a specialization of some discipline, mainly law or economics, and others, among them myself, who wanted to create an interdisciplinary programs. Eventually, the opinion that I have, and some other people, of course, as well, won in the administrative sense, and European studies was officially approved as degree programs that we could officially in Polish university give degrees. My idea was and still is to offer a good, solid, strong general academic education in humanities, social sciences, with elements of law and economics, on which people could easily, independently, individually build their own specialization, their own professional competences. This could be seen as a general university education, and then, or as foundation on which you have to build something. That's why it's important for us to offer students education which they can develop ability to think critically, to think independently, to be able to learn. There still is a certain difficult balance to achieve, difficult balance between professional skills, applicable knowledge, and general education, thanks to which people will be, our graduates, we hope, will be able to function in the labor market, not for first 3 years after graduation, but for 30 years after graduation.
We see that as we have students coming from different regions of the world, we have to take into account that they have also different institutional, cultural backgrounds. And of course, they come to us to teach about Europe in Europe, but they want also to confront these perspectives with the external ones.
What we do in the Bachelor of European Studies is something completely new because we are awarding students with a joint degree, which basically means our degree, the joint degree in European Studies, is recognized in 4 different countries in Europe at the same time. This in itself is obviously Europeanization. Right? It's interesting Europeanization in the sense that it's Europeanization bottom up. But I think this is the big difference between European studies and EU studies. European studies, broadly speaking, starts with the societies, starts with the people, whereas EU studies very often has a much more institutional twist. But we also need to do something else. We need to think about being non-Eurocentric within Europe, to think about the periphery without calling it the periphery. Because Europe is always accused and always in danger of creating some sort of an elite movement.
What I would like to ask you is the role of political climate nowadays in Europe, which is changing very, very fast. How should we teach European studies in Europe as of 2025, in which the consensus around some values is probably no longer.
I struggled with that question as well myself, right? When we teach European studies, as you say, there are lots of values that we have to talk about. Universal values that have been adopted in Europe, but also a lot of values that originate from Europe itself, and that Europeans are being accused of as being too missionary about when they approach the outside world. To come to an answer, Europe, and not only the EU, obviously, but Europe as a continent, as a geographical, as a cultural, historical subject of study, is essentially full of paradoxes and contrasting visions. And for me, this is something that helped me in my own teaching to basically talk about Europe, to always think about and always talk about the alternative. That is talking about the political climate being advocated these days much more provocatively and much more directly than ever before in the last 25 years. I think it's very important for the students to understand that these values are not values that have fallen from the sky, that these are values that have, in a way, been used to unite Europe, also based on the common experiences, and to understand that actually Europe needs to be understood as this entity that is very much full of contrasting visions. At the same time, and this is and makes it so difficult, Europe is full of relationships. We can only think about Europe if we think about Europe as basically the construction of relationships in the past, in the present, and in the future. So we have to teach these paradoxes in Europe.
I think we should somehow in European studies transcend the institutional bubble. This is somehow specific when it comes to European studies. We still feel somehow isolated also, not only within the internal educational system, but also within the university. And I believe that in a situation where we want more professions from with different expertise in EU institutions, we also need to explain to other faculties, to other disciplines, that this is actually European integration is relevant, that they should know more about Europe.
Just in reference to two of the things I've just heard, and one is I think we are probably all agree that what we used to know as European values are highly contested now. This is not to say they are better or worse than they were before, but they are not not such unquestionable verities as they used to be. So I think this whole idea that if you are looking at Europe in the context of other, if you like world powers, if you like global regions, you can use the term whichever term you want, you actually are encouraged or even forced to looking at Europe more through a critical, I don't mean judgmental, but critical lens. Now, the second thing that occurred to me as Kolja was talking about mobility. I think teaching on these very composite courses, teaching on this monolingual, but in another sense, multilingual courses, and also these many students coming from totally different backgrounds. I actually think that's a tremendous opportunity to develop mental mobility for ourselves.
We must understand the position of those who are in Europe and outside Europe, who are very critical about European values as they've been presented and implemented and imposed sometimes. And also that there is a lot in European history that Europe can be collectively or on the different nations blamed for. We know it. On the other hand, I think we cannot, in my opinion, we cannot assume the position that Europe should not stick to any values, should not say of itself that it's based on values, because then if it's completely void, it's completely open, and we may come to the conclusion that if that everything is European, and of course, if everything European is, then nothing is European. I like to think about it this way: the values that we try to promote should not be the values of our past, of our tradition, because then they will be exclusive. But future-oriented values, so we can say, well, this is the way we propose to organize society, not only our society. We should have courage and determination. But of course, to promote the values, but of course, we have to have a very thorough and very open and very, I would say, egalitarian debate about which values.
So I will play a little bit of a devil's advocate, and not against Europe or European values, don't be afraid. I would like to ask about European studies again as a sort of concluding note. Because if we want to teach in an interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary manner, the pivotal risk that we always have is that we are going to teach in a way that makes people know a lot of dispersed things, but in a very shallow way. They might have like a big span of the knowledge, but it doesn't go very deep.
We have this difference between mandatory courses and elective courses, of course. And we should not rely entirely on elective courses, because then we do not reach this common framework. There must be a few courses carefully designed which provide so not just knowledge, but it's understanding and ability to move within this broad framework in understand Europe, understand Europe as a historical, cultural, social, legal, economic space. But of course, there have to be an extensive number of courses which are elective, but with the help of a tutor. I think our students need tutorial. Our students need advice to help them to construct a path through their studies so that they integrate general academic knowledge, which for research universities is essential, and their specialized qualifications, which they may move from more general to more particular. If there is a tutor which advises the students how to make how to make use of their freedom of choice.
A bit of inspiration from the title of the panel, What is Europe for Me? Actually, I wanted to turn it around a little bit and actually ask, what did Europe and European studies ever do for you? And perhaps what kind of skills and knowledge you gained or not here in these different walls of the university that helped you along your way.
What happens if you do such a parcours, and it's not so uncommon today in academia to have such a kind of like road or path to take, is that you become a crossroad yourself. Like it's you shuffle like people through different cultures, and you help them, you support them to go back and forward, and you very much also can benefit from being on that crossroad and getting an insight in different like academic cultures, and learn how to freely operate within that. It's not without tensions, like also within my chair, and so you have to also accept that these tensions sometimes exist, and to see that it's also an opportunity for innovativeness, because this is why we are in academia.
So, what is Europe for me? I think that I have to share my reflection shortly on that, and then the second question of what did they ever do to me? So, what is Europe for me? First of all, it's not just some abstract construct or curiosity. It's something that is deeply personal. It's something that is deeply educational. Something that is deeply professional, and you see why, and something that is deeply existential even. Why existential? And I think it's important to share this because I think it is existential for the countries like mine, like Montenegro, who have been waiting for too long, I think, in the queue for joining the EU to become fully fledged member states, which will happen soon, hopefully. And the second of all, why is it existential? It's because it's still a transitional society. I'm coming from these post-Yugoslav countries, and I think especially in this uncertain period of time and this global era, it's very important that we have order, that we have norms, and that we stick to them, that we have rule of law in place. Because we still carry this experience of the 90s, unfortunately, and we could witness what does it mean when the norms collapse, when the institutions fail, when there's lack of norms and standards and rules. We could see the violence, we could see wars, unfortunately. So that's what we need to critically engage with today as European studies. So for me, Europe also represents kind of framework of stability and order.
To be frank, I think that European Studies and the CES have done everything for me. So I own a lot, I would say. It's not just the way I think or exist, but it's literally all my academic and professional career. So I'm very grateful. Since I acquired during those years really helped me to work in that environment, which sometimes is too competitive. Actually, I really like one of the interventions at the beginning, because we live in a competitive world, but it should be more cooperative. And what is really nice in this environment, in this center, is that sometimes there is more cooperation than competition, and it is indeed what we really need now, I think.
When it comes to what Europe did for me, I'm not going to go into it because I think we all know it's just a huge stack of privileges. Anywhere from water and food safety to my rights as a woman sitting here and talking, which is a huge privilege, my right to get the education, all of the others, I think all of you know, and I truly try to never forget about it. And I try to remind everyone around me that those are privileges, because everyone my age seems to forget. And I've been raised by my parents to remember about them, and I try to remind everyone.
In these uncertain times, and that's a segue to my third question and final question, the question that I want to pose was, what do you, as former graduates, with the perspective of hindsight and reflexivity, what do you think are the most important skills and knowledge that current students, could be taking away from such studies? What are the skills and the kind of new thinking that we need in order to prepare a new generation of people for the work world which you are in?
Well, it's a complicated one, to be honest. What can I recommend to students, and what I can recommend to the CES? Engage more, mainly among also different type of students. That's why European Studies could be an opportunity to explore interdisciplinary subjects and study in Europe as a territory. But at the same time, get involved also with people coming from different areas, because that's the only way how you can really see things from a different perspective.
It's really important in general for people, but also in European studies, not to see Europe and the EU as coterminous, as synonyms, as being the same thing as one another. Of course, European studies has to involve a large amount of work and understanding of European integration, European systems and institutions, but also a broader understanding of what Europe is. And I've also personally felt this is the two, for me certainly as a British person now living in a country bordering Ukraine, the two big things that have happened since graduating from here are Brexit and Russia's war in Ukraine. And just, this is a gross generalization, but I often feel that the United Kingdom is often seen as, generally seen as part of Europe, but British people don't really see themselves as Europeans. whereas Ukrainians see themselves as Europeans, but Ukraine is often not seen as part of Europe. And I think that highlights the complexity of what Europe is. It is not just the European Union, and we shouldn't even see the European Union as some inevitable end goal for European countries. I know it is very important for countries in the Balkans who are trying to join, and Ukraine, of course, has these ambitions. But Europe is much more than that. The EU often symbolizes that, but it's not always exactly the same thing.
So I had a couple of points to make in terms of importance of European studies. First of all, is that I think it's important for countries like mine, but also generally that understanding how Europe works or EU works, it's not a luxury; it's a strategic literacy nowadays. I think it takes a lot of nerves and a lot of training and a lot of practice to be able to work between these two systems, to be able to translate Brussels or the EU to Warsaw or I don't know Podgorica or Madrid or whatever, and to translate this European context into the local context. And this translation between the citizens and the institutions, between the two contexts, is exactly what your good European studies education enables and offers. Also, I think what is important is not just explaining Europe to the outsiders, to the rest of the world, also to the candidate countries. It's explaining Europe back to its own citizens. Again, I'm talking from Montenegrin perspective. We cannot prepare for the Europe of yesterday or Europe of today. Even we have to prepare for the Europe of tomorrow, for the Europe of 2030s, 2040s, which might be even more polarized, might be even more fragmented, might be even more defensive. So we need to adapt constantly.